Hello everyone, thank you for tuning in. Again, I am Katie Bateman, the Managing Director, Community and Partnerships at SheCanCode, and today we are discussing from insurance claims to product management, navigating a varied career journey with resilience. I've got the wonderful Sue Hitchmough from Mercator Digital with me today. She is a seasoned product manager with a diverse background spanning from handling insurance claims to leading product innovations. She's got an incredible and inspiring journey of strength and resilience, and I'm very excited to delve into that with her today. Welcome, Sue. Thank you so much for joining us.
It's an absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you. Well, we'd love to set the scene with a little bit about you, if that's okay. A little overview of who you are and where you come from and how you ended up in tech and at Mercator.
Yeah, not a problem. Yeah, you've introduced me there. I'm Sue Hitchmough, and I'm based down in Hampshire, in Southampton. I've got two boys that are now older and been married for nearly 20 years. And yeah, life's had its ups and downs for me, most definitely. And, I've certainly been through different careers, but I think I'll go through it, but they're all intertwined as to, to get to where I am within Mercator Digital as a product manager. That I've been here for nearly 2 years now.
Nice. And we love it when people say different careers intertwined. Everybody has that squiggly route into tech and through tech, and we love to hear about that you don't have to have the traditional. I graduated with a computer science degree and I knew exactly what I wanted to do with my life when I was, a teenager kind of thing. Out of curiosity, what did you want to be when you were younger? Did you know you were going to end up in tech, or is this a total surprise for you?
Total surprise. So when I was at school, I was like, I'm going to go and be a school teacher, or I'm going to go and be a nanny. That's what I had my sights set on. Um, but then things change. I think it's one of those things that you grow up, you get older, your experiences change, and you just have different paths in your life. And that's not to say that any one of them's wrong. It's just to say that you get to a crossroads and then you decide which way you want to go. So I think I fell into IT. It certainly wasn't something that I was focused on all through my school and my college. I definitely fell into it, but I've I'm enjoying it since I've been doing it.
Yes, and there are so many people like you who say, I fell into tech, which the tech industry is very lucky that a lot of people
Yes,
fall into it. I mean, I think a lot of us as well, we don't tend to have those role models along the way either, where you sort of think, actually, I'd love to go into tech. They're not visible anyway until you kind of reach the world of
exactly.
work. You might see someone in another department or company doing it, and then think, oh, actually, that might be good for me.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think that that's really key, because it's one of those things that I started doing a job and then I got interested in another role within that department. I was like, oh, actually, I want to learn more about that. And then I saw another role that I was like, yeah, I want to learn more about that. And that's absolutely fine. They're all stepping stones as to where we want to get to. Even if we have that, I want to be a CTO or a CEO, you still need to take stepping stones to get there.
Yes, exactly, which is different for all of us. And sometimes we do have to take steps sideways as well. And that is okay as well. Um,
Absolutely.
depends where your career takes you and the different seasons throughout your life as well, and what works for you at
Yes.
those different points. But your career journey, it's been anything but linear. So starting in insurance claims and progressing all the way to product manager at Mercator. Looking back, what experience or roles do you think shaped you the most?
Oh, good question. I think it's very true. I've not followed a structured path. It's certainly not been linear at all, as you say. I've had quite a few varied roles, but I think all of them have shaped me in and had an effect on me in one way, one form or another, to be honest. Starting in insurance, I was having direct interaction with customers that and they were in stressful situations, so it was the claims that I worked in. So they'd either just had an accident, or somebody had bumped into them, or something had happened where I had to learn how to deal with an upset person on the phone, calm them down, be able to provide them with a quick solution so that they weren't left at the side of the road, for example. So I think that certainly helped to build strong skills in active listening, which is definitely one thing that has helped me to progress. I could understand what the customer needed there and then, even if the customer didn't understand it themselves. And I could empathise with that individual as to the situation that they were in, assess the situation, prioritise what they needed, and find a solution for them really quickly. Couldn't take hours, it had to be very quick. I think then making that transformation from, a person that's behind the computer desk and just using the software, to actually helping to design the software when I became a business analyst, completely chalk and cheese. But from being an insurance claims handler, I was able to understand the pitfalls of the software. I could understand how it needed to work more effectively, more efficiently, both from a customer point of view, but also from the user's point of view in the call center. So that experience then really helped me to progress as a business analyst and translate what the, say, Joe Bloggs person needed into a technical requirement so that the developers could build it. And I'm hands up, I'm not a technical person at all. Don't claim to be. That's why we have developers that are really good. But being able to go, right, what is it that the technical people need to understand? This is how we want to make it quicker. What do the technical people need to know to go, that's how we can make it quicker, if you understand. And that really helped me to go up into a product management role, because that's key. From being a business analyst, I was exposed to the software development cycle. I could then start to understand it, not be an expert in it, because that's why we have experts in their fields, but understand what that role does. And I think that has really shaped me to where I am, because understanding the wider picture, understanding what those roles do and what they need from me as a business analyst, as a product manager, means that I can make sure that I deliver it to a good quality and standard of what they want. So you suddenly see the bigger picture, as opposed to just going, like, this is the one thing that I'm focusing on. And I think that's really key, and that's certainly helped me, along with making sure as a project manager I was organized. I was able to prioritize workloads for my team, including the development team, um, articulating to the team and the customer what the end goal was and how we were going to get there. I think that was how everything has kind of, it's like a snowball effect. You start with a bit of snow, and then you keep rolling it and building on that knowledge and experience, that then you get to that building the snowman, so to speak. I think when I became a general manager, then I was able to piece together all the puzzles, all the jigsaw puzzle bits. I was able to then understand, what the CEO would want at that level of understanding, what the technical people need, what the marketing person and the salesperson, and how it all came together. I didn't need to understand the actual job that they do, as in how they do it, but I needed to understand why we needed that role, what they needed for me. And that, I think, combining everything together has really helped to provide me with, or to build a strong foundation of empathy, problem solving, process thinking, and most of all, communication. Being able to understand what the CEO, how to communicate with the CEO, how to communicate with the developer, how to communicate with the stakeholders. They're all different. And I think, having all of these roles together, that's what's helped build the solid foundation that I've needed to then go into product manager.
Yes, I love that. I love everything you just said, because a lot of our community wonder how can they transition into tech if they haven't got any experience from other techie roles, or it's their first time in the tech industry. And what you just said there was, it's figuring out your story, what you're good at, what you don't want to do, and just going with the things that you're really good at. Because
Yes.
you working with the public, and especially working with the public is hard anyway, but working with the public when emotions are running high in a position that you were, will really make you of how you're going to deal with pressure and deal with people, and then take that to your next job. And it's just realizing that you're not starting in tech with, just starting from ground zero. You're starting with loads of other really important soft skills that you've learned along the way, and how to
Yes.
move those along your career. And even when you get to that management point, you're right, it's that, how do I manage upwards is one thing, and how do I manage
Yeah.
my team as well? And also realizing, and something I've noticed as well, you have that thought of, "Oh, everybody expects me to know everything," and actually
Oh,
you don't have to, because like you said, you've got your developers, you've got the people that know what they're doing. You don't have to do
yes.
that, but you have to have
No.
people that know what they're doing, and you almost have to take a step back and say, this is what I'm good at, this is what that person is good at, and that's it. You do you, and I'll learn
Yes.
to manage, and that's it. But
Exactly.
that's such a learning curve sometimes.
Yeah, you don't have to go, I need to know everything, because nobody knows everything. But what makes a team, that certainly from a product manager point of view, the team that I work with, it's like we are all building something.
Mm.
No, none of us are experts in everything, but we are experts in our own individual area. And it's like a wheel. If you were to take a cog out of a wheel, that wheel would start to limp and eventually break. So, but if you put that cog back in, the wheel keeps turning and it keeps going, and it would go on for miles. And that's the thing with the product management. It's understanding that if one particular area doesn't know what's going on, that cog's broken, and then the whole thing fall down. So you need to make sure that you can understand why people are doing something, what they need from you, and that you give them the best, whether that's information, whether that's just a bit of an ear to talk to. It's all those kind of things. And I think, like you say, because I fell into insurance, that gave me a really good foundation to then start to build on those skills that certainly as a product manager I needed.
Yes, yeah, and that would have really made you for your next role and the next role. It's just
Yes.
almost stepping back sometimes and thinking, actually, all of these different things that I've done have actually helped my route, and really shaped me along the way, even if you don't always realize at the time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's, if you're doing a role and you've done it for a while, it could be months, could be years, whatever, and you go, actually, I quite like what that role's doing. I want to go and investigate that role. That is a good way to progress, because you're learning and you know then that you've got skills for that role that you want to progress into, and you can start to build on it. And so it's trying to understand that you don't need to know everything 100% before you go into that role. You can just learn about it.
Yes, as long as you're that sponge that's
Yeah,
ready to soak up anything that an employer throws at you.
yes.
Definitely. And you've worked in lots of different types of environments as well. So you've worked in startups and large corporates. What have you learned about adapting your approach to product and people in such different sized environments? That it takes a certain person to work in a startup.
Yes.
What have you learned along the way? That's the very different startup to corporate.
I think, and it does take a particular person to work in startups and then to be able to transition to a larger company. Um, and it's offered me a really fascinating contrast of how people interact and how services or products are built. Um, and I think no matter whether you work in a startup or a large organization, in both environments, it's highlighted that you need to be able to adapt really quickly, and you need to be able to adapt to different cultures, to different processes, and the ways, the different ways in which people like you to communicate. For example, when I was working in startups, you know, I learned to embrace the why. Why are we doing something? What's the vision? What's the overall vision of that company? And I would sit round a table with a CEO and a CTO and a designer, and we were all on an equal level. Yes, the CEO got paid, but he also had a lot more responsibility than I did, but we were all on an equal level. Um, from a startup, you understand the core mission, and you come back to this all the time to go, right, are we achieving what our mission statement is? Um, are we achieving how we're going to solve the problem that we set out to do? And you're not getting sidetracked. Um, Also, the acceptance of doing something really quickly, even if it's not 100%, is probably better in a startup than a larger company. Um, you know, you need to, as a startup, you need to get something out on the market quickly. You need to make that impact so that people are aware of you. Um, and also, startups don't have huge budgets. So, you know, I was wearing many hats. I was user research, I was data analyst, I was marketing, I was a business analyst, I was a tester. You know, you need to learn how to be resourceful and how you can look at different solutions and best option for both the company and the customer. And like I said, you need to learn to communicate with different levels within the organization. I think on the contrast to that, being in a larger company, you need to learn to how to navigate your way through more complex processes, um, and understand the other areas that might not be part of your team, but they have dependency upon you. So you need to make sure that that collaboration of working together is there. Um, Large companies are definitely more data driven than startups because they've got a history of things that work, things that haven't. Um, so you also need to manage a wide audience of stakeholders within a larger company, um, understand who they are, get their buy-in, manage their expectations. You know, larger companies go, right, this is the way we're going to progress for months. In a startup, what you agreed on yesterday could now change instantly the next day, and you have to learn to adapt and be flexible.
Some people don't like that. I've noticed that you can have
Exactly.
whiplash from working at a startup and you're like,
Oh,
just gonna go with it. We test weekly, go with it.
exactly. And if something's not 100%, that's okay.
Yes.
I've always gone by the 80-20 rule. If something is 80% there, it's good to go. Um, I think really the best bit of advice I can give that I've had to deal with going between a startup and a large organization is you've got to be a bit of a chameleon.
Yeah.
You've got to understand that the environment that you're in. You need to adapt your style accordingly to that environment, but always ensuring that you deliver the best possible solution, product, work, whatever. But you need to just go, right, okay, what do I need to, how do I need to be today? I'm talking to the C-suite today. So actually, they don't want too much of the lower level detail, as opposed to I'm talking to developers today. Yes, I need to go into that detail. So yeah, I think being a chameleon is definitely what needs to happen.
Yeah, and it's so personal as well as to where you
Yeah,
pick and choose where you are, at what stages of your career, at what stages in life as well as to what you choose. Because a startup, I've always found that you can learn really fast, really
yes,
quick, and you can be given so much responsibility sometimes that, like you're wearing so many different hats. You're like, you know what, I'll learn. There's no one else here, so I will learn. That
yeah,
doesn't work for everyone if you're thinking, you know what, I'm now thinking of having a family and I'm not going to have the time for that. It's a different season that you're going through, and you might think, I just need a stable job at this point in time where I can just shut
absolutely.
off, do what I need to do. And then you'll go through a season where you think, you know what, I'm going to throw myself into this challenge. I'm going to learn absolutely everything. And how great that you get given that responsibility, but it is
Yeah,
incredibly hard. And sometimes I think people will think being at a startup perhaps is easier because it's smaller, and it's not
oh,
always the case, because actually there's less people there to help you. So you kind of just,
exactly.
like you
I
said, you have to be a chameleon.
yeah, I think one of the good things with a startup is you get if you are happy to take on a lot of knowledge and learning, you get put in front of situations that you wouldn't do in a larger company. So
Yeah,
you get to understand why a CEO or CTO is thinking the way they are, why marketing might do something the way that they're doing it, as opposed to larger companies where, you know, most people, if they're in a large company, they don't see the CEO because they don't need to. You know, they're doing their thing to keep the business running. Whereas in a startup, the CEO is trying to go, I'm giving you all this information. So
yeah,
it really does depend on the individual. You know, you like you say, you do have to be a particular individual to work with a startup, and then to be able to adapt that in a large company because you won't always know the information that you need to know in a startup. But actually, you don't need to know it in a large company. So it,
yeah.
it's it's interesting. It really does depend on the individual.
Yes, definitely. I've always loved a startup environment. It's very challenging, but you just take something from each one and
Yes,
and move
you
on.
do.
So resilience, it seems to be a key theme in both your personal and your professional life. How has
Mhm.
your health journey influenced your mindset or approach to work and leadership?
I think for me, everyone goes through ups and downs in life. That's just what happens. That's in your personal and your professional life, and you know that's okay. And everyone deals with it differently. For me, it was very much learning to keep going. And some days that meant just putting one foot in front of the other. Certainly when I'd come out of hospital, you know, one foot in front of the other and taking each day, sometimes even each hour as it comes. Um, and the approach I took other times was actually I've been doing good for these last 2 days, so I can take each week as it comes, and then each month as it comes. But always remember what the end goal is that you're trying to get to, because that's certainly what I done. You know, my aim after my surgery was to get back to work, be back to work, involved, and be able to take on a job that I enjoyed, that I was comfortable doing. and I had a bit of responsibility. That was my end goal. I knew I wasn't going to get there day 3 of coming out of hospital. So it was the little steps that I needed to take to get to that. So it's good to look at the bigger picture, and that's what keeps you going. But you don't want to try to jump to get there straight away, because otherwise you will fall flat on your face, to be
Yes.
honest. So you need to take those stepping stones to get to the bigger picture. And that's what I've always done. You know, certainly within my career, I haven't gone, I'm going to be a product manager. I've gone, do you know what? I like this job. And then I like the business analyst. And then I like the general manager. And it's gradually led me up to the end result. Um, I think even at work with the team that I work with, I always encourage them to take the same approach. Think of the end goal, but what are the small stepping stones that you need to take to get there? Um, because if you look at the bigger goal, you become overwhelmed. And I think that's very much my my key for having the resilience that I have, is it's trying not to look at the bigger picture, but the individual steps. And for example, as a child, when they're growing up, you don't expect them to walk straight away. You expect them to crawl and fall over, and then crawl again, and then get to cruising, and then take their first steps. And that that's you praise every single stage that they go through, and that doesn't change in life. You need to take the small wins as well as the big ones. And if one day you've gone taken 2 steps forward but 3 steps back, it's just been a bit of a bad day.
Mhm.
Reset and start again tomorrow. um and that's okay. You're not gonna achieve everything you want to on day one. um and I think you just need to keep amending the path that you're taking yourself down. Um, it works for a while, and then your path changes, and you need to try something new, um, and understand when something is too much for you. You know, when I came out of hospital, being able to, I knew I couldn't go back to my job. I say 9 till 5. I don't think I've done a 9 till 5 job for years. But, doing a full day's working, I knew that I needed to have a power nap in the afternoon.
Yeah.
And that was okay to do that, and I think it's learning to be kind to yourself, and adapt where you need to, how you're feeling on that particular day. But just look at it as if you want to get to the waterfall at the end, but you just need to take these little stepping stones over the little rivers to get to the bigger piece.
Yes, yes, I couldn't agree more. And especially with a journey like yours as well, it's that path to recovery. It's so unpredictable that you start to think, like, this is the plan, doctors have told me this plan, and then that plan will change because it's all very
Yes,
unpredictable. And you're so right. If you don't adapt and take one small step and then another step and then your path changes, if you don't get used to that, that becomes very, very overwhelming, and how you're going to get through that. So you're so right to almost break it down and just do, okay, a little step, and then,
yeah,
instead of thinking of that all the way at the end of the path goal that you might not ever reach, whatever that first one was. So you think, I'm going to do something else now. But
that's
breaking it down
yeah,
is, yeah, the only way.
it's key, because you don't get overwhelmed then. You know
Yes.
that you can see, and actually what you need to do, and ticking off a box. For me, when I first came out, even getting out of bed, having a shower, I might be shattered at the end of it, but those were 2 big wins for me.
Yeah.
you know so you take the wins, and if you fall, you just get back up again. Tomorrow's a new day. As I always say to people, and I think myself, the earth will continue to revolve, and nobody's going to die if you haven't achieved getting out of bed today, for example. And it's making sure that you put things into context.
Yeah, yeah, to be kind to yourself along the way,
Yeah,
definitely.
yeah.
I wanted to ask you a little bit about another type of challenge as well. Working in male-dominated industries, you've worked in a few. So, what challenges have you faced along the way, and how did you find your voice and confidence in those spaces?
Um, I mean, don't this is a tricky one because I don't want to come across as all females aren't listened to or anything like that, because we certainly are. But and I'm not going to share my age, but when I started within the IT industry,
21.
exactly, again and again, um, when I started within IT, it was a very male-dominated led area. Thankfully, that's changing. You know, certainly at Mercator Digital, our senior leadership team is a really good mix of both male and female. Um, I think when I first started out in my career, roles like such as CEOs and CTOs and other senior leadership roles, um, they were mainly governed by males. Um, so when I started to work my way up, I felt I needed to go above and beyond what my male counterparts were doing, just to prove that I could do my job just as good as they could do. Um, to be honest, I was mindful of the way that I dressed, that I spoke, that I conducted myself. You know, having children, I didn't want to take too long off for maternity in case I got forgotten about. But then when I went back to work, I didn't want to talk about my children too much in case people thought that I wasn't serious about my work.
Yeah.
So it was it was a really fine balance. And I think, to be honest, in the end, it was driving me mad. It really was driving me mad. Um, all I could do, and this is the best advice, is show how good you are. You know, that's the thing. Have confidence in yourself. And I think when the penny dropped on that for me, um, the whole male, female, oh my goodness, that completely went. And it was, I'm good at my job. And actually, they will see the results,
Yes.
and that was the thing. Going into a meeting, having confidence, um, you know, having people listen to my opinion and actually saying to them, I'm sorry, I don't agree with you because of this is and justify why you don't agree. And to be honest, that's male and female, any gender that's involved in a meeting. Don't be afraid to speak up, and I think every company's getting so much better now, but you're on the same level as them. And I think, you're not going to get it 100% all the time, the 100% right all the time, but neither's anybody else. So I think we just listen, we learn, listen to advice, um, and learn from mistakes and look at what other seniors are doing, be it male or female, and follow their lead. Um, but don't change you as a person. Be true to yourself, and your results will shine through. And yes, you come up against challenges no matter what your gender is now. Things are better. Um, but yeah, I was definitely at the stage when I was younger in my career, very mindful of, oh my goodness, what am I going to do? I need to juggle all of this. But I've calmed down and learned that it's fine as long as you just show who you are, you show your skills, and you communicate with them. You you know, it might not happen overnight, but you'll shine through.
Yes, definitely. And I think it's such good advice because something that you learn as well is what you can almost predict what you're going to be asked by your seniors as well. So
Absolutely.
you get used to that. So when you say how to show you're good at something, you're almost learning just to predict what they're going to ask you in that meeting. So when they say, yes, that's great, but where's the data, or how can you prove that? You've already worked it out because you knew what they were going to
Exactly.
say. But you don't know that when you're younger. So they'll ask you
No.
something and you'll be like, oh, I don't know, or you say you don't know and you think, okay, I'll go and look it up. But you kind of get used to that, and so you start to prove your worth a little bit more because you're just prepared. You almost know, I know what my boss is going to ask me
Yeah,
before he's already said it. So
exactly. And that does come down to experience. You know when you go into a meeting, the kind of things that they're going to want to understand, that what the main purpose of that meeting is. But what I would say is, if you don't know what the purpose of that meeting is, just ask. You
yeah,
know, don't be scared to ask them, what's the agenda? What's the objective of this meeting? What do we want to get out of this meeting? Because you can be prepared then, but actually, if it's an ad hoc meeting that they've pulled you into, don't be scared to go, I don't know the answer to that question, but I'm going to go away and find it
find
out.
out. Yeah,
That's not because you you're not prepared or you're thick or anything like that. That just means, actually, I'm going to give you a proper response once I've found out all the facts and figures. Um, and I think, that is really important, not to think, oh my God, they're going to think I'm being thick, because they won't. And another bit of advice somebody gave me is, the people sat opposite you, they are trying to convince you that they're doing a good enough job and they know what they're doing, the same as you're trying to convince them.
yes. That's true. That is so true. Once it dawns on you, you're like, oh, everybody's doing the same thing. Yeah.
Exactly.
Love that. That's such good advice. I wish that had dawned on me earlier.
Yeah.
So you don't have a traditional degree background, like a lot of our community, but you've carved out a successful path in tech and product. What would you say to someone who feels like they don't tick the right boxes, but they want to break into this field?
It's funny because when I speak to a lot of people, they are surprised that I don't have a degree. Um, and all I would say is, if your listeners don't feel that going down the degree route for them is right, that's absolutely fine. If they feel going having got that degree is right for them, that's absolutely fine as well. A job description, don't look at a job description and go, I need a degree to even be considered. You know, look at your skills, look at your experience, because that also plays a really big part, above what traditional qualifications are that are needed. Qualifications are fantastic. They really are good. I was never academic enough to get a degree, but that didn't stop me. I learn in different ways. So, if you haven't got the degree, but you want to have the confidence that you tick that box, and you're keen to understand what a particular role does, investigate it. We have Google, we have the internet now, and there's always information available. You can take online courses, free courses. There's always articles online that people can go and research. So never stop learning, but learn in the way that works for you. Always be inquisitive and just ask why. Ask questions, find out about how other roles work, how they interact with the role that you're interested in. And yeah, don't be scared to question why other roles are doing something, because you might even ask them questions that they've not thought of themselves, to be honest. So I think, if you feel you don't tick the boxes, you probably do. Just because you haven't got something on a piece of paper, you've got experience either within voluntary work, within a part-time Saturday job, communicating with the public. It's all those kind of things that a lot of people go, yeah, but I only worked in, say, B&Q, for example, and it's like, yeah, but that takes organization, that takes communication skills, that takes collaboration amongst other departments. So, you know, don't just think this is what they're definitely going to look at. Always look at the bigger picture, not just the qualification, but the skills that you have that means that you're suitable for that role.
Mm.
And always be open to learning. Yes, they might go, okay, you don't have qualifications, but you've got experience. They can learn, they can help you gain those qualifications if they need to. The same as if you've got qualifications, they can help you learn the skills that you need. So I think, don't necessarily look at it as in, right, okay, I haven't done this bit, I haven't got a degree, you've got other experience out there.
Yes, and if you're struggling with that, I totally agree, because you could almost make sure that you ask somebody else as well, what do they think your
Mm,
skills are? Because you don't always realise yourself. Like you said, some people think I've got a Saturday job and I haven't quite noticed the skills that you've learned. And something
yeah,
I share a lot on here is, when I was a student, I worked at McDonald's. And if you've done a breakfast shift on a Sunday morning and everyone's got a hangover, they are angry and they will not
yes.
wait 3 minutes for that breakfast to cook. So that kind of, it made me, as a young person, I had to be very organized and work very quick. And I
Mm,
noticed that we had loads of people start at McDonald's and didn't come back for the second shift. They could not cope with the speed of what was
yeah.
happening and the people that are shouting and the buzzers, and it's mayhem. But it really does make you, as a young person, to work in an environment like that.
It does. And I think, ask for feedback. Ask for feedback for your peers because they will compliment you in areas that to you, you're just like, but that's just what I do. That's just what you should be doing in the job. But that's not obvious to everybody.
Yeah.
So you suddenly see your, where you're good, and they'll give you feedback to go, actually, you're good on this, but to improve it, you might want to do X, Y, and Z. And even now, on any projects that I'm on, I will always ask my team for feedback, not to say, go on, give me a glowing report and make me feel great, but just to go because I always want to learn that and to understand that what the way I'm working is helping you within your role. So constantly ask for feedback, and make sure that you look at the self and go, actually, it's sometimes not always common sense, or what seems common sense to you is a skill that you've created.
Yes, exactly. And one of those skills as well is spinning a lot of plates, and being able to do that in your career. And I wanted to ask you a little bit about balance as well. So, balancing a demanding career with motherhood and a major health challenge going on as well, is no small feat. So, what does balance look like for you now? And what advice would you give to others who are trying to juggle it all?
You're right, it's definitely been a balancing act. And I think for me, balance now looks very different to what it did a couple of months ago, a couple of years ago. It's a constant work in progress. Um, for me, and my advice would be prioritize. You know, don't be afraid to delegate. It's not a sign of weakness. And that's what I've learned. If I'm struggling one day, I might need to say to somebody, can you pick this up because I can't focus on it today? Or I'm in meetings all day and it needs to be done as a priority, but actually anyone could do it if I give you the information. Um, I've learned to understand what's essential and what's important but can wait, which
Yes.
is which is really key. Um, if you have five people, they're going to say to you, they're all priorities. What I want you to do, they're all five priorities. You'll land up trying to deliver all five, but not to the standard that it should be. So you need to go, right, okay, this one's my priority because they need it by 2 o'clock tomorrow afternoon for a meeting with a potential customer. This one isn't. so much of a priority because they need it by the end of next week. So it's making sure that you can align the priorities correctly. And that goes for work, for home, for the health. You need to be comfortable to say no and suggest an alternative. So that could be, suggesting another time for a meeting, or at least be able to explain to them why that date or time or request doesn't actually work for you at the moment. Um, Understand and build a strong network of support. That's key. Certainly for me, that's helped me to be able to balance being a mum, having my health issues, maintaining a house, maintaining my job. Um, you know, if I'm having a not so good day because of my health, anything that is involved in the home, I can lean heavily on my husband on, or I've now got older children, so I can try to delegate the chores to them. I say try being the operative word there. Um, Also, organise a check-in with your work, with your company. You know, I have a check-in with Mercator Digital once a week, once every couple of weeks. All I need to do is just ping them, and they're like, yeah, when do you want a coffee and chat? And it doesn't have to be in person, it can be on Teams, but that just means that I can either talk to them about something that I'm finding overwhelming within work. Um, if I'm struggling with my health on a particular couple of days, they can understand, they don't have a crystal ball. So, making sure that you talk to them and you check in with them, is really key. Everyone juggles lots of plates, working, motherhood, health. And I think that, again, the best piece of advice that my surgeon gave me was just remember that life is a marathon and not a sprint.
Yes.
That's what you need to do. um I had the operation and touch wood, everything was fine, but my recovery and my mental recovery took longer.
Yeah.
So that's where he was saying it is a marathon and not a sprint, and that really does relate to everything. And just be kind to yourself. Do what works for you. It might not look conventional to anybody else and it might not work for them, but that's why we're all individuals. It's about finding what works for you. Um, Nothing remains static. So being able to acknowledge the change and adapt accordingly to that, that's key as well.
Yeah.
Just make sure that you prioritize and you delegate and you look after yourself, and you've got support network. None of it is seen, if you delegate, if you talk to people, none of it's seen as a weakness.
Yeah.
um, it just makes it a lot clearer for you in your head, and that's certainly what I found from having my health issues, definitely.
Yes. And being at a company as well that enables you to do that. So you think, I'm going to be kind to myself today. I am at a company that understands as well that I'm not a robot and that I am a person and a mother and all of the other things that are happening in my
Yeah,
life. And I need a company that understands that, and not somebody that just says it on a section on their website either, but actually
exactly.
it's how you feel every day when you come to work, whether you can ask for flexibility when you need it, how it's received. All of those things are so important as to why people stay at companies and why people just leave and go and do something else.
Exactly. And, certainly within Mercator Digital, we've celebrated my son passing his driving test. They've shown concern and support when my dad's been hospitalized, when I first started the job. And that's key. They might not necessarily have the answers at all, but being able to talk to them, and, you know, if they don't know anything about it, they can't do something to help support you. And I think that goes for work, that goes for family. If my husband doesn't know how I'm feeling, he can't do anything to help me, even though
Yeah.
I expect his crystal ball to be working.
Come on.
Yeah. So just
um,
remain true to yourself.
it is such good advice. It's something that sometimes we we tell ourselves but don't always action on, to
Yeah,
actually be kind to yourself and speak to yourself how you would speak to your friends. We don't
exactly.
always take our own advice, but it is brilliant advice to end on because we are already out of time. It's absolutely flown by, so thank you
It
so
has.
much. So it's been a pleasure chatting with you, so thank you so
Absolute
much for coming
pleasure. And
on.
I hope that there's just one little bit of an insight that, your listeners might take away. It doesn't matter how big or how small. Um, all I'd say is just keep pushing for what you want to get to, and you'll get there. You'll get there. If you don't achieve it, first of all, you'll just learn from that, and then you'll go on to achieve great things.
Incredible advice. Thank you. And for everybody listening, as always, thank you for joining us as well. And we hope to see you again next time.